Before we begin, thank you very much to Charlotte Forever 10 for joining the Patreon campaign. Thank you very much for the support. Appreciate all of you for helping to keep this channel going and keeping it alive, as well as working toward a lot of those big goals. You know, we did a TJTV episode because you guys showed enough support for me to actually be able to put something like that together. And continued support will keep things like that coming. That does include random review, which we haven't been able to get to because I've been sick this month. So we might have to get to it next month, but we will be getting it one way or another because you guys put me over the top for that one. So thank you so much for the support. Always appreciated. I said that one of the projects I wanted to do for the 40th anniversary of Transformers this year was to go back to all previous years and do a top 10 toys of the year. Obviously, we've done it in recent years, but there is a different science to going back to past years, especially the oldest of the years, and trying to whittle down what the 10 best toys were. And in my head, I thought early 90s was going to be the rough part, you know, where all I have to pick from is Action Masters, Micromasters, and like European and Japanese releases. But truth be told, 1984 was not a cakewalk either, because you only had roughly 30 toys to pick from, and once you whittled out things like repaints, MiniBots, cassettes, and the Chronoform watch toys that weren't going to compare to the fully featured cars and jets, you have a surprisingly small pool of cars and jets to pick from. So it's not so much a best toys of 1984 as it is half the toys of 1984. Nevertheless, that's the gimmick, so we have to go with it. So here we go. Based entirely on personal preferences, here are my top 10 Transformer toys of 1984, and we are going to start with a MiniBot, because of all the bots, I do think there is one that does stand out enough for me to actually give it a nod on the list. It's not any of the Mysterian molds that got borrowed by Hasbro and Takara, and it's not, it's going to be from the Microchange set. But that only leaves two options, and it's not the option you think. I'm giving the nod to Cliffjumper. And I give him the nod because overall he just kind of looks better than Bumblebee. I understand Bumblebee, cute little Volkswagen bug, okay, fine. I kind of like the idea that, like, he's a squat version of a sports car, so it gives his vehicle mode a more unique look. He still has the fun and simple transformation of Bumblebee, looking a lot more solid and complete than the other MiniBots. But something that actually occurred to me while picking, for this list, do you realize that Cliffjumper is the only Year 1 MiniBot who has a head that's accurate to his animation model? Because they swapped out the visor and faceplate from Bumblebee, and of course the four Mysterian molds that all have the same black visor, plain face mask. All those got switched out too. So Cliffjumper is standing kind of unique as the only one that really represents his on-screen character well. That gives a bit of an edge to the toy, though we are trying to judge strictly by how good the toy is, and I do think that engineering on these figures, this design specifically, is charming to itself. So you could give the nod to Bumblebee as well. Like I said, this list is going to be based a lot on personal preference. For me, though, I think Cliffjumper just edges him out as the best MiniBot. At number 9, we are going to cause some controversy because I know this is a hated toy in Generation 1, but hear me out. Hear me out. There is good reason to put Ironhide on this list. And the good reason is the fact that when you look at the Autobot car lineup, you're looking at a lot of the same stuff. There's a lot of white cars. There are a lot of hood becomes chest type transformations. And they all kind of have the same play pattern. Very simple articulation, okay transformation, and then they all kind of play the same way. You get launching fists or missile gimmicks, and that's mostly it. Ironhide and Ratchet, as a result of repainting, actually offers you a bit of variety at that price point. You're getting a completely different style of robot that actually has a battle-based kind of play value, something you would only otherwise be able to get by spending big bucks on the Optimus Prime toy that year. If you are a kid on a meager allowance in 1984, you can't really afford that. That's more of a Christmas or birthday item, but Ironhide? Yeah, you save up a few weeks worth of allowance and you could swing an Ironhide. You could actually get this. So, play value wise, I do find a lot of value in the figure. I would rank it higher if it wasn't for the robot mode. I will admit, the robot mode does not look as good as the others. That does come from the fact that in Diaclone, it wasn't meant to be a robot. It was meant to be a walker mech that had a pilot riding in behind the windshield. That's why the head is flat. It's actually a chair. So I can't put it too high up, though I do think this figure gets a lot of hate it does not deserve. I do think it has a lot of really positive qualities, especially when you think of play value compared to his other Autobot cars. But yeah, he is rough looking, so I can't put him terribly high. We know it's the animator's fault that it's inaccurate. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the robot itself just doesn't stack up. But I still think the toy is fun. We'll enter the realm of Autobot cars properly at number 8, and once again, I'm looking for standout. I'm looking for ones that personally pop for me, because we are dealing with a lot of toys that do kind of the same thing. So for me, at number 8, we're going to start in with Blue Streak. We start in with Blue Streak because I like the color better than Prowl. Prowl's iconic, don't get me wrong, but when you're looking at the field of Autobots in 84, you've got Wheeljack, Prowl, Jazz, Mirage to a lesser extent, that are all kind of pulling a white color scheme, and it all just starts kind of blending together. I find myself more drawn to the cars that have a stronger, different color scheme rather than just being painted white. Don't get me wrong, I identify Mirage as a blue figure, but because of his fragility issues, I wasn't going to put him on this list. So rather than him, Blue Streak gets the nod. I like the silver and red color scheme. I do like the overall look and style of the robot mode. It's going to be lower on this list simply because someone else later in this list does kind of the same thing a little bit better. That said, the Datsun mold's fine. You know, it's a classic. It's iconic of Transformers, and yeah, it's not too bad of a figure overall. You know, we're kind of in the middle realm of how like G1 toys were, but he stands out. You know, and since you stand out amongst the pack, you make the list. Speaking of standing out, there is one character and toy we have to talk about that does so in both character and action figure. So in this instance, for number 7, we are going to discuss Sunstreaker. He is notable, remember, because he is literally the very first transforming car toy that Takara ever made. There were transforming, shape-changing robot toys that predate Transformers, but as far as Takara, Transformers, and Diaclone go, he's the very first car they designed that could transform. And they did a pretty decent job on it. Aside from the fact that the custom vehicle mode looks really cool and really unique, yellow and black is a really striking color scheme. It's worked for Bumblebee for 40 years. Tack on interesting design elements that make him memorable, like the big wing ears in robot mode, and you've got a memorable design that is doing things a little bit differently than your standard Autobot cars. It's a shame that his color scheme ends up matching Bumblebee's. Otherwise, I think you'd see him a lot more often. And I wish we did, because it's actually kind of a cool personality. You add that in with classic Japanese gimmicks like firing fists, and then a couple of extra accessories just to give him a little bit more flavor. And yeah, for the first time that they ever did a transforming robot car, I think they nailed it. This is a really nice, really standout figure that, even today is kind of fun to play with. So congrats. True to his character, he stands out enough to make the list. I did mention that there was a character who did the standard Autobot shape a little bit better than Blue Streak and Prowl, so let's go ahead and get him out of the way. Let's bring Jazz in, and we'll talk about Jazz here just a little bit. Proportionally, I do find him a little bit better than the Datsuns. He presents a little bit stronger as an overall body shape. You can see why he's kind of portrayed as second in command in Generation 1. He does have more of a bit of a presence to him than the Datsuns do. I think it comes from the fact that his wheels end up on the tops of his shoulders to give him a much larger shoulder look compared to them. I think that helps a lot. Also, what helps for me is the fact that the robot legs are not comprised of the rear of the vehicle in the same way. The Datsuns have to rotate them around so the rear window becomes the legs and the bumper becomes the feet. And that's fine. I do like when they use car bulk to actually make the robot mode, but there is something to Jazz just having normal robot legs appear that does make him stand out to me a little bit more, even if it is just similar engineering done differently. You tack that on with just a really nice overall look, what I would call the best of the white painted Autobots. Nice weapon, nice missile launcher placement. Yeah, and just an overall cool look. I like the racing stripes. I like the overall head sculpt when it isn't mismolded. And overall, I think as far as the traditional Autobot cars, the hood chest look, I think out of the originals, I think Jazz just does it just a little bit better than the Datsuns do. So he's somewhere in the middle of the list. He's not the best Autobot car, though. There is one that I would put higher up. And spoiler alert, it's the last time we're going to be talking about the standard Autobot cars. After this, we're going to be getting into some more interesting standouts from the first year. So right now, let's talk about Sideswipe. So for starters, you are already getting a figure that, admittedly, I'm probably putting a little bit higher up because he is so close to how he looked in the cartoon. Out of all the figures they've done, he seems to have been the least tampered with when they started doing the animation models for these characters. So that's playing into it a little bit, I admit. But overall, I think it's just a really solid and really nice toy. I mean, I like the more sleek look that he has because his hood folds all the way down instead of sticking out forward. I do like the appearance of the robot mode legs. Again, we got a shoulder missile like that. We got a nice accessory weapon like that. Just a really cool look overall. I guess like this is my second Lamborghini on it. I guess I'm just a Lamborghini fan. Either way, regardless, it's an overall great look for the vehicle. It's an overall great look in the robot mode. Does help that he actually has shoulders and elbows, which, guess what? In 1984, that really was like a big leg up. You're right. Sunstreaker only has elbows and a little bit of butterfly bicep if you consider it. So play value wise, he's got a little bit more going on than some figures in the range, but just he gets by on just how good he looks. And maybe it's just me liking the look of red and black. Big surprise, right? But no, out of the Autobot cars, I think I would call him my favorite. You're probably wondering where the Decepticons are, and for starters, Decepticons were far fewer in number in 1984. Remember, Reflector didn't even come out until 86, and that was a mail away. So we're actually dealing with a much thinner pool on the Decepticon side that's being bulked out by a bunch of repainted jets. And those jets do have to make some appearance on this list, it's just a matter of which one. And this again goes down to personal preference. So for me, if I'm looking at all three, I'm giving the nod to Skywarp. The black and the purple are iconic Decepticon colors. I think they stand out a lot more amongst the original 84 lineup, especially when you consider Starscream basically has Optimus Prime's color palette, which makes him look a little bit samey, when you look at the entire lineup. Thundercracker stands out a little bit more, but really, when you hit black and purple, it's just Skywarp. That's really the only one you've got that really like hits. And yeah, it's just a super cool, super good looking color scheme in both modes. The toy you could knock some points for, and it's probably only getting to number 4 because it is very part-former. That's unfortunate. You can transform it for the most part without taking wings and tail fins off, but when it comes to landing gear and fists, well, you've got no real option there. So that knocks a few points off of it, but not much, because the jet toy, again, brings variety to the lineup. You do have the firing missiles, which work in both modes. That's great. And the fact that it's a jet means that you don't have any weird placement for its weaponry. You know, they're just under-wing missile launchers, which is correct for a jet. So that helps a lot. It helps the overall presentation of the character and the toy. And yeah, it's iconic. It just looks good. This toy always looks good, no matter how many times they redo it. You could have put Thundercracker, you could have put Starscream. I think play value wise, they all end up at number 4. I'm just not going to fill the list full of repaints. So we're going to stick to 1, and for me, Skywarp. Now at this point, the list is probably a foregone conclusion. It's just a matter of who ended up where. And again, this is entirely based on personal preference. Yours is going to be very different from mine, most likely. So when I say number 3 is Soundwave, that's going to draw a few people's ire because I know this is a favorite G1 toy for a lot of people. So let's get this figured out. Number 1, you've got the cassette gimmick, which is probably the best gimmick in Generation 1. It's just a lot of fun as a toy. You do have a lot of fun little features, like the fact that his weapon can store away like batteries in an actual battery compartment. Little things about the toy, like the spring-loaded chest door, just like an actual cassette player would have. Things like that. You also have the missile launching, because of course you've got a missile launcher, and a surprising amount of articulation for a Generation 1 toy. Soundwave is a toy that kind of stands up today. I just got my retro G1 Soundwave. I think it's still fun to play with. On a technicality level, it does rely on additional toys in order to be cool. Ravage and Laserbeak, I kind of have to judge as independent toys. So technically, I have to judge Soundwave without them, even though we're still considering that the gimmick is really cool. And we will admit, the cassette player mode doesn't really have much playability, because everything you can also do with Soundwave and robot mode. So it's not really doing anything unique. And of course, it's kind of dull. I mean, compared to a jet or a Lamborghini, it's a dull alt mode. There's just no avoiding that. Story-wise, you can come up with things, but when you're just, a kid playing with things, it does come up on the dull side. It does come up on the simple side. So, unfortunately, I can't put Soundwave any higher than this, even though, yes, he's an exceptionally cool toy that does some really standout things for Generation 1. But that's just how it goes. I do think he is at least worth top 3, because he is, as I said, still really fun. Here's the point where the list pretty much ends, because you know who is left, and really, it's just a matter of who I put at number 1. So, whichever slide is about to come up, for a fact, the other one made it to number 1. So, for those who just wanted to find that out, thanks for watching. See you next time. But for those who actually want to hear my opinion of why they ended up at number 2 and number 1, let us continue with Optimus Prime. So, why does the Autobot leader come second? Well, it's a great toy. It's got some decent articulation for a G1 figure, and of course, the play value on it is fantastic. You have the base mode with the drone that can fold up and do a whole bunch of things, missile launching included. You've got roller that can eject out. That's always fun. So you do have a lot of interactive value. Little things, like the gas pump. People kind of disregard the gas pump, but, for a kid playing with their imagination in 1984, little things like that can make a big difference. Also the fact that it is large enough to store other Autobot cars, which, again, adds more value, adds more play value to it. Optimus Prime himself just looking like a really good toy. Like the G1 Prime's always been a really good looking figure. The only reason he places in number 2 is because I think the number 1 has a little bit more play value. And this one is hurt by one factor and one factor alone, and that is he is a little part for me. Remember, the original G1 Optimus had to have removable hands. So many of them that you see today don't have his hands. I think even mine at home is missing his hands, which is unfortunate. And that's how a lot of G1 Primes were kind of left. It is a fantastic toy. It's an iconic toy, one of the best toys of the 80s. It's still number 2 in my mind though, and really I might have even been able to flip this with Soundwave. If I had thought about it for 5 more minutes, I might have convinced myself Soundwave was the number 2, but I'm gonna put the Commander of the Autobots this high. I think he deserves at least that. This only leaves us with one option, so let's not really mess around with it or delay it any more than we have to. The video's long enough as it is. Let's talk about Generation 1 Megatron. So, let's just be blunt about this. There are concerns over toy guns today, but in the 80s, it was fun. Toy guns were fun. They let you play with your imagination a lot more than, standard cars and jets because it's the real size, it's the size of the real thing. So, it's like, being able to play with a gun, but safely, right? And there's that kind of imagination value to it that you have to factor in the 80s, but there is also just the play value and the variety that this toy was capable of. The robot mode, yeah, again, animation model makes it look worse, but I still think it looks good. I still think it is a really cool looking piece. Interesting transformation. I mean, as far as transformation goes, it's probably the most complex of 1984. And then the gun mode itself, I love the variety. I love that all 3 of its components are removable, so you can just have a standard Walter, 380P. The serial number blanked on me the last minute. I don't know why. Walther P38. You have that, or you have the full Man from U.N.C.L.E. version with the big silencer, the scope, the ankle stock, and now it's a super cool looking weapon. And then all that can disassemble and combine into a big cannon emplacement for the larger figure. Couple that with some accessories that were never shown in the TV series. If you're lucky enough to have the Japanese version and got a cool sword out of it too. But when you boil it down, I think the play value in Megatron, both as a role play toy and as an action figure, tops Optimus Prime just a little bit. Like I said, it's all personal preference, but for me, the most fun toy of 1984 for a Transformer fan was Megatron. So, that is my list. As always, feel free to disagree in the comments below. This is one where I feel like, especially those top 3 are going to be very divisive. But you know what? You're free to have your own opinion too. So, feel free to share it with me. And as always, I will see you next time.